Hey there, welcome back to the show. This is Phil Vischer. You're listening to the Holy Post podcast. I am here with Skye Jitani.
Hi, Phil.
Hi, Skye. And Christian Taylor.
Hello there, Phil.
Hi, how are you, Christian?
Great. I'm great.
Yeah, are you good?
Really great. Yes.
Do you think you're still in quarantine, or do you feel like that ended and now we're in some other crazy phase of American history?
I was hoping you had asked me this. I feel very much in a hybrid because I still am home most all the time. However, I went and got my nails done this week. The week before, I got a facial. We have been out to dinner.
I thought I noticed a new face.
Yes, thank you. And I have new nails. They're so nice.
Yeah.
And I even went to car shopping. But I will say, when we went to go car shopping, we got in the car and my eyes were so hungry to keep driving, just to see things. I felt like, wow, look at that. And
there's still stuff out here.
Yeah, that's the same reaction my dog has every time I take him in the car.
I felt like a dog.
Dogs don't remember that there's still stuff out there. We very rarely are inside long enough to feel fresh when we go outside. Dogs have no, of course, long-term memory, as I've proven in some of my scientific research. Okay, it's time for the theme song. What's the news that you like the most? Who's your favorite podcast host? If it's breakfast, get your toast. It's Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. Skye and Phil and the Holy Post. And sometimes Christian. So this was an interesting week. Wasn't it an interesting week? Would you say it was an interesting week, Skye?
Quite, yeah.
Let's start with, who should we start with?
Well, you guys have both been so busy.
Busy little beavers. Christian, how was your event to show your film around D-Day?
Thank you very much for asking. We just shared it with our donors and our cast members and stuff like that. And people were shocked at how much was changed, which I guess I must have forgotten how much was changed.
Yeah, that happens when you're working on something every day.
Yeah, and so, but it was resoundingly accepted, and it is now down to an hour and a half. So people, I think, were happy about that. And
that's good.
We interacted a lot with the people in France on D-Day. We sent them a message from America, and the French have gone crazy for it. We were thanking them for all they do for our veterans, and we shared it in French. And so it's just spun around all of France. We have so many shares and views and comments. So that was very rewarding.
Wow.
And then yesterday we got a sales rep reached out to us and wanted to talk to us about representing us to distributors. So that was exciting too.
Sales reps are handy people when you have something that needs repping for sale.
So yeah, that's
cool. Congratulations on that. And for making all of France feel good on behalf of all of America.
Yeah, they need a little love from America because it hasn't been coming from, anywhere else.
Other parts. Yeah. Okay. Skye, yes. I need to talk to you. Now, we don't have a guest, right? We don't have a guest.
No guest.
So we're just going for it. It's just us. It's
just
Jason.
Us
today. If only there were things happening in the news to talk about that our audience might be interested in.
I don't know. It's coming like a fire hose right now. It's just all the stuff.
We even decided we were not going to do 2 episodes this week. Otherwise, we will be behind the times.
Yes, right. We usually do 2 at a time every other week, but things are happening so fast that we're on a weekly schedule so we can stay timely and topical. Timely and topical, the Holy Post podcast. Skye, you wrote an op-ed that got picked up by USA Today.
Yes.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Has that happened before? Have you been in, one of the big national publications?
I wrote for the Washington Post religion blog some years ago, which I'm not sure qualifies quite as Washington Post, and I have been quoted in the New York Times.
You've been quoted in the New York Times? Okay.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
As saying, why am I never quoted in the New York Times? And they thought it was ironic to quote you.
Not exactly.
What was the story? What were you quoted about?
I believe that was about the Nashville statement a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that? Hoopla? Yeah. Which actually, that quote ended up following me to South Korea and created a bit of a stir there.
Couldn't you have it stopped at the border in some way?
No. Hey, New York Times, all the news that's fit to print.
All it
It
is
made it
is
to South Korea.
Wow.
But anyway, yeah, USA Today picked up this one. And apparently, I did not know this, but USA Today is the most circulated newspaper in the country. And I think that's probably because of hotels.
It's because it's on everybody's door in everybody's hotel. And we pick it up and we set it inside the room and then we walk out of the hotel.
Right. I think it's the most circulated and least read. But
yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah. Kind of like Gideon's Bibles.
Good point.
Thank you. Also hotel related. If you get things into hotels, you're in business, but you may not actually reach your target audience. So do you want to, for people who haven't seen it, do you want to summarize the angle of your article, which might give a sense of why it may be considered provocative? And then you can tell us how it has gone over.
Sure. I don't even have it in front of me right now, but the title was something along the lines of Donald Trump's Bible or George Floyd's, the choice facing American Christians.
Oh, you put Trump in the title.
I did.
Was that your title or was that their title?
I wish I could hide more behind US Today's editors, but they ended up preserving an awful lot of my op-ed, including most of the title. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of shocked by how little they changed.
Okay.
But there it is. Yeah, it was my thing. So essentially what inspired me was coming out of that photo op that the president had in front of St. John's Episcopal Church in Lafayette Park, which is right across from the White House.
Yeah.
If you recall, he cleared the protesters or had the protesters cleared out of the park. Forcefully. That's
with or without tear gas. It is.
Yeah. The Secret Service has come out and admitted that they did use pepper spray to clear the crowd. So
yeah.
And then Trump had
Moses used pepper spray to part the Red Sea so the people of God could get through. So I think there's precedent.
Mm-hmm.
You are now listening to the Babylon Bee.
Right. So then Trump had that very awkward photo op where he held up a Bible.
Yes.
In a kind of mechanical way.
Yes.
And a reporter asked him, "Is that your Bible?" And he said, "It's a Bible."
Yes. This is a Bible. Yes.
It was just, the whole thing was super awkward. And a lot of people are pointing this as like a jump the shark moment for the Trump presidency, perhaps. But what I kind of came away from was the clear way he was using the Bible as a political token, or Senator Ben Sasse just called it a political prop. And it is evident that Trump didn't really care what the Bible says. He just cares about its presence as a signifier or a symbol to his base that, whatever.
Is that like the virtue signaling from if you're an arch conservative president?
I think so.
Okay.
Although we've had conservative and liberal presidents in the past who have used the Bible, but they've used it in a more substantive way, whether it's reading a passage or citing it or praying in a moment of national crisis or whatever. So this is not a liberal, progressive, conservative thing. It's a Trump compared to every other president we've ever had thing.
Right.
So anyway, based on that kind of staged performance, I talked about how for a lot of Christians in America, that's very much how they view the Bible. They don't really spend much time worrying about what it says or what it commands. They're more worried about using it just as a symbol, as a political vessel for their belief system. And I talked about my own experience of seeing that within the church around the country, and the way Christians will sometimes go to great lengths to dismiss various commands of the Bible as irrelevant or impossible, particularly the Sermon on the Mount, which is what my latest book is about. And then I juxtapose that with the data that's come out about African Americans and the way they view the Bible. So there was a Pew study that came out in 2014, and then it was confirmed by a Lifeway study in 2018 that shows African Americans are far more likely than other Americans to read their Bible. They're twice as likely as white Americans to see it as God's authoritative word, and they're more likely to actually hold to biblical ethics than white Christians are. And that's the tradition that George Floyd came out of and had a important experience of conversion with Christianity. He obviously had a very checkered past and various run-ins with law enforcement and criminality. But for the last number of years of his life while he lived in Houston, he was very involved in church ministry and reaching out to the streets, of connecting churches to kids on the street. He had a basketball outreach program. He took his Bible everywhere he went. And so just looking at the African American posture towards scripture versus a lot of the rest of Americans' attitude towards scripture, you see this strong gap. And my argument was basically American Christians right now are facing a decision between viewing the Bible the way Donald Trump does, as an empty totem, or the way the African American church does, and George Floyd, which is a book that is actually the word of God that we are called to try to follow to bring justice and peace and transformation to ourselves and our communities. So that's basically the article in my verbal summary.
And how has it gone over with the people who stay at the Days Inn and found it on their doorstep in the morning?
That I don't know.
Okay.
But I mean, I'm grateful partly that USA Today doesn't have comments on their editorial page.
Oh,
so I don't.
Yes.
Yeah, so that I don't know how that's happening. I am not on Facebook because I think it's evil. So the only feedback I'm really getting is on
Twitter is straight from heaven?
No, but it's not quite the same level of Dante's Inferno that Facebook is. So the feedback I've seen on Twitter for the most part has been positive. There have certainly been some critics, but the most consistent criticism has been that we shouldn't be holding up George Floyd as an exemplar of Christian faith because of his criminal record.
Mm.
And I haven't responded to that, mostly because other people on Twitter have responded.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the last time he had any kind of conviction for any kind of criminal activity was 13 years ago.
Mm.
And beyond that, I don't think having a criminal record doesn't make you qualified to read the Bible authoritatively.
Right.
Well, if we're going to apply that standard, then we're going to have to kick David out of the conversation.
Well, and what about Paul and Peter and everyone else who's, so it goes on and on. But, then the other side says, well, Donald Trump is imperfect and why are we holding him to a standard and blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm not holding him to any moral standard. I'm just showing that he doesn't engage the Bible the way anybody who reveres it engages it. Right. He doesn't read it. He doesn't open it. He doesn't quote it. He doesn't cite it. He doesn't whatever. And then if someone else threw up a picture of Bill Clinton with a Bible in front of a church. Have you seen that floating around?
Yep.
So again,
he
USA
did the same
Today,
thing. He had the Secret Service use pepper spray to clear people away from a church, including clergy from that church and parishioners from that church, so that he could stand in front of it with a Bible.
Yeah, and I'm not here to defend Bill Clinton's faith in any way. I don't know the man, but
I was being sarcastic.
I know
he didn't.
The photo of Clinton was fact checked by USA Today actually, and they found that it was taken in front of a church, I think a Methodist church that he regularly attended. The photo was taken as he was exiting a worship service at that church, and it was actually Bill Clinton's Bible that he was holding. So it's a little different.
You're thinking that makes a difference.
I think that makes a little bit of a difference.
I don't see the difference. Okay.
So,
if you say so. What's the maddest response you've gotten from someone on Twitter?
Oh, I don't have it in front of me. I think, you hear the standard stuff. Well, what were we supposed to do? Vote for Clinton?
Oh, right. So they're going all the way back to the election, and you're accusing them of sinfully voting for the wrong person 3 years ago with your article today. Yeah.
Or someone said they were bothered by the way the op-ed made it sound as if no Christians in America take the Bible seriously except African Americans, which is not what I said.
Yeah.
I said some Christians, and the data shows far fewer white Christians take it as seriously as African American Christians do, and that's just fact.
When you throw the data at them, particularly, I think we talked about, maybe David French had this article, where when your experience does not comport with the data, it makes it very difficult to accept the data.
Right. That's true. I get that. I feel that way often. But I think the line that gets quoted the most from the article, I don't even have it in front of me, but the one that people are reacting to is I basically say in there that Christians want to believe that they're marginalized in society because they take Jesus too seriously. And I'm convinced it's the opposite. We're being marginalized because we don't take Jesus seriously enough.
Well, I've said all along, if we actually lived like Jesus called us to live, if we lived that intentionally all the time as a big group, people would want us everywhere. I mean, people have said before, oh, Christian, when you say that, they killed Jesus. But the fact of the matter is he was claiming to be God. And, but if Christians are constantly reflecting his
and
character.
the religious people killed him. The world,
Right.
the world was not calling for his death. His co-religionists were calling for his death.
Yeah.
Right. Because he was a threat to the status quo.
Yeah, just like Skye and his
Just like me.
Oh, man.
And not only Skye, someone else made a little video this week.
Sticking it to the man. So that's interesting. So let's see here. Last week, the week before last, and we talked about this last week, I'd written a couple of pieces on the holypost.com site about, I never use the words white privilege. Never. I don't think I ever used those words, but a lot of people said, oh, you're talking about white privilege. And we believe white privilege is not real. So now we're angry with you. In fact, I did, and then someone sent me a video of a woman, an African-American woman, explaining how you cannot be Christian and woke. They're incompatible. And another man sent me a video explaining to me how by claiming that is white privilege is slapping God's face. So I'm getting really interesting reactions, and a lot of them are coming around in little videos, and so we kept pointing people back to the podcast that we did on race 3 years ago. Here, go listen to this, and I realized it's 40 minutes, or it's an hour long. It's got 20 minutes of us just chatting at the beginning. It's hard to get people to look at that. What if I turned it into a video? So Wednesday night, I think I was lying in bed thinking about it. I said, I'm going to make a video. That was last Wednesday night as we're recording this. Thursday after lunch, I went into the office because it's quiet, away from everyone here at home. And I sat down and in about 3 hours wrote a script, like a 6-page single-spaced script.
That's unusual for you, let me just say.
This is
doing
what
it that quickly.
Yeah, this is what I want to say. Well, we had all the data. We had all the data from the podcast and from the class that my brother had put together. And I updated it with some new stuff that I'd learned since then. And then I went home and I had dinner on Thursday night, and then drove back to the office, which is where I have a little studio. And I sat down on my little desk on my little set, and I loaded that script into my iPad teleprompter, because I can't memorize a 6-page single-page script. And I just read the whole thing off, staring into the camera. And then, so that was Thursday night, kind of late, probably finished about midnight. Friday, I, after lunch, started editing and edited most of the rest of the day Friday, and edited about probably 7 hours on Saturday. And by, I think at 2 a.m. Sunday morning, I had finished it.
Did you do all the graphics yourself?
Yeah, I did everything.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's a huge accomplishment. You can now submit that to any short film festival you want. In fact, I would encourage you to submit it to the Christian Worldview Film Festival next year.
And then what happens?
And then you could win an award. And then
I could become a filmmaker.
And yeah, you could become a filmmaker.
So that was early Sunday morning. And then I thought, okay, I'm going to go to sleep, and I'm going to get up and watch it again and see if I feel comfortable actually releasing it into the world, or if I've made a huge miscalculation. So I slept. I got up. I sat down. I watched it. I made like 3 tweaks and thought, okay, yes. So that was, as we're recording this on Monday. So that was yesterday, 2:30 p.m. I posted it on my Facebook page. A half an hour later, it had been watched 2,000 times, which kind of surprised me. Like, oh, wow. And then we finally got it loaded up on YouTube, so it could go out on Twitter. And then that went out about an hour later. And I thought, well, this is kind of cool. 4 hours later, it had been watched 20,000 times. And I thought, well, wow, that's like, a whole podcast episode, like our race podcast episode in 3 years has probably been listened to 30,000 times. So that's how many people we're able to hit in 3 years. So last night before I went to bed, I checked it, and it had been watched 35,000 times. When I woke up this morning, it had been watched 85,000 times.
Wow.
Yeah, and as of right now, hang on, I'm reloading the stats on. So it's been out for 24 hours. 24 hours, yeah. On Facebook, as of right now, it has been watched 153,000 times. which is like
this might be your most popular thing ever it is, I think, in this short amount of time.
This is it is the most widely consumed piece of Holy Post content by a wide margin, like almost 4-1.
We'll talk about the content in a minute.
Yeah,
what you actually say in the video, but what have you learned about the format?
Yeah, I told my son,
because I think this is really important.
I think I need to, sing the "What Have We Learned" song to say what is, because we're trying to communicate with people. That's fundamentally what we're trying to do, is like get ideas across in a way that is acceptable. And this is whether I'm doing What's in the Bible or what or doing the Mr. Phil show and trying to explain different people from the past. How can I get this idea across to people? So I'll write a blog post and then you throw it out there. You put a couple hours into a blog post, you throw it out there, and do 100 people like it? Do 100,000? You never know. You never know what's going to happen. Podcasts, we have a good audience for the podcast, but it definitely has a ceiling. And then this is just multiplying over that and being shared really, really rapidly. It's easy. It's not too long. A lot of people, because it's 17 minutes long. It's like you got to sit through it. It's 17 minutes, but you learn so much in the 17 minutes. It's visual. It has. If you're a visual learner, just listening to someone read statistics is hard. Seeing them visualized is much more compelling. So I'm trying to figure out what I'm learning, except that this is a really good way to communicate with people. I'm thinking, Christian, yes?
I know what you're learning. I've actually been waiting for you to learn this for a really long time. You hired me to work for you back in the days of What's in the Bible for one episode. And what I've been waiting for since then is for you to be woke to the new way of sharing media, because in some ways you were so successful about, the way you fit the model that you had, and it worked for you for such a long time, but everything has changed. And not only do you have the things that you've just listed off that make it more shareable and more popular and stuff like that, but you have who you are, and you have all the stuff that you did before, which increases it exponentially. And that is the way of things now. People are visually consuming media. You shorten it even more, it goes up even more. You add subtitles to it so that people can just read them on YouTube, it goes up even more. So it's crazy how the new models of media have changed in terms of sharing, and you've just in one fell swoop.
Yeah. So I'm kind of flipping out, because I made a 17-minute lecture about racism, and it's been viewed 150,000 times in less than 24 hours.
You will keep having that effect if you do things like this, because people want to hear. It's when you were going around to colleges, and all of a sudden everybody that was watching had watched VeggieTales, they wanted you to speak in about adult issues. And you, in my opinion, you've done that all the way along on the podcast, but this time I feel like you've been more visible, more vocal, more loudly.
I guess.
I think people appreciate that a lot.
I agree with Christian, obviously. And I've been telling you for years, Phil, that you should employ your talents toward the adult audience, not just kids.
Yes.
And I know you have a deep heart to see children understand their faith and the scriptures better, and you've been really effective at that.
Yeah.
But adults are just children in bigger bodies that smell worse. So using your storytelling abilities, your teaching capacity, your creativity, all that toward this kind of stuff. I mean, I think part of the reason it's 150,000 views right now is because it's such a pressing issue, and you've done a great job of communicating something that a lot of people need to learn about.
Yeah.
That aside, I think the same qualities can be employed in other topics that may not be front burner issues for the church or for the society, but still important for us to learn about. And I think that's what the podcast has been doing for 6-7 years now. But you may have just cracked open a whole new way of doing it.
And you wanted to do this. This podcast was born out of your desire to do a talk show, which cost money and wasn't very efficient or effective. And so we started doing this, which was free. But you take it to a shorter format, you make it visual where you excel, and you take big issues and melt them down, that's going to be consumable. I mean, Skye's gift is taking dense theological concepts and words and just making them into doodle figures and explaining them.
Yeah.
Yours is doing the same thing, but in visual things. And it's just so super helpful for.
Yeah. And just the fact that you can, if you can produce a video that is compelling enough to get people to engage with that kind of conversation that long, because I'm also looking at my attempts to try to change people's minds on Twitter, which I would say are not great. That doesn't work very well. The Twitter seems to be a really effective medium for communicating short, snarky, pithy statements that will, and they succeed. And I think I need to be careful more when I tweet, because I've made some people angry, and I'm sorry. They succeed when they polarize. The statements that pull people together tend not to succeed as well. So I'm finding that it's interesting. The two tweets, do you want to know the two tweets that I've tweeted in my tweeting experience that have gone the farthest?
What? Oh, I know one of them, but I forgot. Oh, shoot.
Yeah, the two that have gone farther than any other tweets are when I took on issues that the church was being a little hypocritical about, or being extreme about, and did it with a tinge of sarcasm.
Yes, humor.
Yes, well, not just humor, but a little bit, because there's a part inside me that's the sarcastic kid in the back of the class in high school. It's just that I would never say the things loud enough for anyone to hear. So I was a sarcastic kid that no one knew was the sarcastic kid. Except the kid sitting right next to me, who was my friend, who would then repeat the things I said out loud, and everyone would laugh at him. The one was calling the church to kind of abandon the idea that Bill Gates had created the coronavirus in a lab to depopulate the world and or bringing in the Antichrist. And that went farther than anything I've ever tweeted. And what I discovered was, when you're kind of sarcastic in a tweet, the people who agree with it agree twice as hard, and the people who disagree twice as hard. And so everyone reacts kind of twice as strong as they otherwise would, and it's not a productive conversation, because people just go to their corners and get even more angry. And then the second one was the one I tweeted last week that some people really didn't like, about white people. Please stop looking for the one African-American who agrees with you and then holding them up as our new favorite black person. And that has gotten more likes than any other thing I've ever tweeted. And a lot of people, especially people of color, saying, thank you for tweeting that. But it's gotten way more pushback and way more anger than anything else I've ever tweeted. And I realized, wow, okay, if I had phrased that a little less snarkily, because it was a little snarky, it wouldn't have made as many people angry, but it also wouldn't have gotten shared as much, because we love to repost and retweet jabs at our enemies that we find particularly biting.
This brings up a conversation I had a couple of years ago with a friend who I will not identify on the podcast, but he's been quite effective. He's been quite effective online and in media. And I was talking to him privately about, like, what have you learned from your experience in being kind of a public voice in social media world? And he said to me, there's only 3 ways to rise above the noise to get heard. He says, one is anger, which he admitted was his preferred tactic, to just be angry and pick an enemy and go after them. The second is earnestness, to be so transparent and vulnerable that people can't help but look. It's kind of that's what a lot of mommy bloggers do. They just here's my life. I'm going to open it up for everyone to see the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you just can't look away. Or the third is humor, is to be funnier, and maybe that's sarcasm, but to be funnier to get some attention. But if you don't use one of those 3, you're probably going to get drowned out on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so I think when you view sarcasm, Phil, it's been because you're trying to be funny, because you understand, you intuitively know that that's the only way you're going to get heard. There is a risk in it, though. And I mean, sarcasm is really just humor tinged with anger.
Yes. Yeah. Sarcasm. I tweet sarcastically when I'm annoyed by something.
Yeah.
And I'm ready to poke, and a lot of people, I mean, I'm getting, people on Facebook saying, I used to be a fan of yours. I'm like, oh, come on.
And,
oh, come on.
But Phil, is that because you've used sarcasm, or is that because they just fundamentally disagree with the position you're holding?
They disagree, and because I was a little snarky about it, they feel personally attacked. That's what I believe. That's what I believe.
Well, I also think that people have put you in a category. They don't know you. They know what you've produced. And so if they agree with you, they think you think like them. And I think what is hard is that people are beginning to discover you're much more dynamic and not exactly what they expected. And so you're sort of like that thing that you take a bite of that you think is going to taste one way, and then it shocks you and it's totally another one and you hate it.
So you're saying
that's a chocolate covered turd.
Yeah, sort of like that.
Oh, for the love. I was going to say I'm the wrong apple. I was, this is way too tart. I was thinking this was a sweet Mr. Rogers apple. And it's actually, and that's why, you want to know why Bob the Tomato is the way he is?
Why?
Because I want to be like Mr. Rogers, except I'm just too snarky. I can't pull it off. I have to suppress the snark, and then it comes out sideways. And that's Bob the Tomato. He wants to be Mr. Rogers, but he's just like, I'm so cranky. I'm so cranky.
Fair enough, Phil. But if Mr. Rogers were doing
how
his
would
thing
Mr.
today,
Rogers tweet? How would Mr. Rogers tweet? I think it would be like tweets coming from the mouth of God.
Perhaps, but I'm saying I think he would be politicized and controversial today if he were doing his show. I mean, what he did in the 1960s and 70s, around issues of race, for example, were very, very provocative.
I know, but he did it like Mother Teresa giving someone a back rub. It just felt so good.
But the difference is today, what passes for political is different than what was 20, 30, 40 years ago. So even if you took all that sarcasm out, there would still be people upset. That you're saying systemic racism exists in America. Because it's become politicized.
Did you ever have a back rub from Mother Teresa while she was alive? She was good. You almost had a back rub from the Dalai Lama sitting in a.
He touched my shoulders.
Yeah.
Can I point something else out?
Yes.
So I think, I've had people, and we have publicly too on social media, had people speak to us about, sometimes we're a little too casual about speaking negatively about Christian brothers and sisters who may have, said or done difficult things. And, or I'd like to share your podcast with so-and-so, but you were a little too harsh. And so if I share this with my friend, they're
Snarky.
then it's going to reflect bad on me or whatever. What I think you did in this, what both of you did in a sense, is you were thoughtful about what you said, and you put something together that was truthful, but not necessarily so offending.
Right.
People now can share it and say, educate yourself. Here is some of the history of things. And it gives people time to process that. And I think you've set a great example and talked today on what you've learned, which was super helpful for younger generations, when they're thinking about wanting to share their opinions and ways to interact positively. I think that's a great example. And so I would encourage you to do more of those, simply because I think they're an effective way for you to engage with culture and give them some things to truly think about.
Yeah, I'm just looking because the response to the video on race is almost universally positive. Just a handful of people saying, but Ben Shapiro says there is no systemic racism. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. The response to some of my tweets has been much more mixed. Like, oh, okay, need to learn something there. Need to be careful. Need to keep the snark holstered when engaging on a tricky issue. Holster the snark.
There's also a fundamental difference between a 17-minute long discourse and a 280 character sentence. right?
Yes,
You
this is
can't, it's
true.
not a medium for nuance.
Right, right. Okay, let's, Christian, yes?
Yeah, I was just going to say, could we talk substantively about some of the articles that came out this week as well, and sort of what you're thinking about, this moment? I've had a lot of people who are typically, in the South, Republican, evangelical Christian, coming and asking questions of, okay, I'm kind of curious as to what you really think politically, because I've always felt like, Christians have to be Republican. They have to be, X way. And now I'm beginning to really question everything I've believed. So, I just wanted us to talk a little bit more deeply about some of these things that Christians might be struggling with and how they respond. And
Well, if the subject is how should a Christian vote this fall, that's a whole series of podcasts in and of itself. Or how do you go about? So that's not something we can address.
no, I'm thinking
at
it's
this point.
more, how do they educate themselves? And I think, one of the things that I've been repeating, I mean, I've heard you guys say it over and over again, is it is really important to look at what Jesus calls us to be, and then question things around us, things that we've always been taught or things we've always thought about, and begin to listen to some other voices that are not in our echo chamber. And I think being open as a Christian to thinking at things in a new way is a beginning. I mean, would you say that's true, Skye?
Yeah, I think one of the dilemmas here is we have been, all of us, shaped by a culture that wants everything to be either or rather than both and. So, for example, you have to either believe abortion is a problem or racism is a problem. You can't believe both are, because our politics doesn't let us hold both as a problem. And what's happening in this moment is one side wants to believe racism is no longer an ongoing problem, because if it is, then we have to address it, which takes energy and attention away from the issue that they think is the most pressing matter in the world. And as followers of Jesus, we just need to avoid this either or mindset and recognize there's a lot broken in this world, and no political party has a monopoly on righteousness. And we all have to wrestle with, what are we called to engage and how are we called to engage it without having to diminish the calling of others and the work they're trying to do in the world to make it a better place. So the either or thinking is just toxic, and it needs to stop. I don't think any of us supporting Black Lives Matters right now in any way should diminish other problems in the world that we believe God grieves over as well.
Right. Yeah. Someone again tweet, where's your video on abortion? Like, well, can I just make one video at a time? And I think we have a lot of videos on abortion made by conservative Christians already floating around, so we might be covered there. Okay, can we switch topics before the end of this? Because something else happened this week that I think is worth talking about. And if you haven't read Skye's piece, go to holypost.com. It's up there on the site. If you haven't seen my video, go to holypost.com. It's up there on the site. We reorganized the site so it now has an articles section and a videos section, and then the podcast section. So it's easy to find the stuff we write versus the stuff we talk versus the stuff we visualize, which includes the Chinese duck army animatic from a few weeks ago. There was a major ruling today on LGBT rights.
Yes, why don't you tell us about that?
Skye just coughed, but carefully muted his mic before.
I did mute my mic.
Good job. That
Thank
was
you.
Well done.
I'm a professional now.
You're an old pro.
Uh-huh.
Just summarize for us. What happened? Supreme Court ruling. What do we need to know?
So in 1964, there was an equal rights bill passed saying employers cannot discriminate against people because of their race, their religion, and their sex. The debate before the court was, does that prohibition against employment discrimination based on sex include sexual orientation or sexual identity, meaning transgender people? And the ruling came out 6-3. So this was not like a nail biter. It was, strongly in favor of one side. And it was 6-3 because two conservative justices, Chief Justice Roberts and Neil Gorsuch, who was appointed, of course, to fill Antonin Scalia's seat by President Trump,
To be
both sided with yeah, they're both conservatives, and they both sided with the liberals on the court to affirm this, that yes, the 1964 law does protect sexual orientation and transgender issues from discrimination, which means basically employers can't fire somebody because they're gay, and they can't fire somebody because they are transitioning their gender. And conservatives are not happy about this because they believe that when that law was written in 1964, the word sex was meant to refer to male and female. It had nothing to do with sexual orientation or transgender rights. And to read that back into the bill is not to interpret the law, but to legislate a new law. And they were saying, if Congress wants to pass a law to protect gay folks or trans people, they can pass that law. We shouldn't impose it back on this existing law. And Neil Gorsuch basically said he disagreed with that. He wrote the majority opinion, and I think some conservatives, especially those who supported Trump, because he was going to appoint a strict constitutionalist to the bench, are pretty ticked right now that they feel betrayed by Neil Gorsuch, even though, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah, it is very interesting.
Does it have any bearing on churches and religious organizations?
The ruling actually brings that up explicitly and says that the employers that were involved in the cases before the court had no religious argument to make. They were not religious organizations. They were not claiming an infringement on religious liberty. So they said how this relates to religious liberty is going to have to be worked out in future cases before the court. So we don't know. But what it does do is create a precedent where, for example, Christian colleges or Catholic colleges and universities that want to restrict employment, you know, there's one thing to say churches or houses of worship are clearly protected by the First Amendment, but there's this gray area for other religious organizations and institutions like schools or hospitals or charities.
Right.
And what does it mean for them? And that we just don't know yet.
Well, how long is it going to take to know?
Probably years and years.
Oh, okay.
And the courts, I mean, I'm certainly no religious scholar, a legal religious scholar. Your brother would be, Phil, more than me. But the courts tend, in my experience, to like to rule on things that are fairly clear cut. Yeah. And they leave all the gray, messy stuff, and they tend to kick the can down the road a little bit. And I think that's what they're doing on this whole issue of gay rights and religious liberty.
Well, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And in other news, Jerry Falwell Jr. apologized. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I want to know what happened behind the scenes because that's not like him.
Yeah, this would be, I think, his second apology since high school for anything. He tweeted a picture of him, of not himself, but of a coronavirus face mask with an image of the governor of Virginia, who is a Democrat that Jerry Falwell Jr. despises for his left-leaning policies, but who had appeared in I believe was it in a college yearbook or something in blackface at a costume party, and took that picture of the governor he despises in blackface and next to another student in a KKK hood, and put it on a coronavirus mask and said, the only way I'll ever wear a mask is if it has this on it, if it's this one that I've designed. And that has led to 3 or 4 faculty members that are people of color resigning from Liberty University, and African-American alumni protesting. Skye.
But I think we need to clarify what his intent was.
Okay.
Was his intent basically, he obviously disagrees with the governor's call to wear face masks, and he was trying to point out the hypocrisy of the governor?
He was making fun of the governor.
Because back as a college student, the governor had been in blackface.
Yes. So I will only wear a mask if it makes my enemy look bad, is what he was saying. Strictly
speaking, I can't believe I'm defending Falwell here. I'm not. But strictly speaking, he wasn't advocating blackface or the KKK. No. He was trying to disparage his political enemy.
Yes.
Okay.
Equally, biblically defensible.
Yes. Love one's enemy.
Or indefensible.
Unless they're the governor of Virginia.
But yeah, and it has led to so much flack, so much pushback that he's actually apologized for doing it. It's an extraordinary moment in history.
I want to know what he felt would be the fallout had he not apologized. Yeah. Like, what was the funding that was going to be withheld, or what kind of boycotts was he
Right.
going
Well,
to face.
yeah, I think part of the question was, would they ever be able to have a diversity chair at the university ever again after the current one resigned in protest? Would you be a pariah to take that job as a person of color, feeling it was walking into an insensitive environment where the prior person had quit in protest over racial insensitivity? So hopefully that makes him think a little more before he tweets. We all need to, that's the lesson today. Think a little more before you tweet. And it makes more sense to make a video.
And retweet. It's important to think before you retweet.
And retweet as well. Yeah. What else? Skye, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have a closing thought. Everyone should go buy my new book.
Hey, your book's out.
Yeah.
What if Jesus was serious?
Where is it? Oh, it's over here. I have it here.
Yeah, hold it up.
Mm-hmm. I haven't even given you guys a copy yet because I
don't have a copy.
We haven't even been together.
I need to order some. Or would you rather I order them from Amazon, or just you give me 2 and I just give you $10, which will probably put more money into your pocket?
Yeah, I honestly, Phil, I appreciate the thought, but I don't need your $10.
I want to give you my $10.
That's okay.
I'll
give you a book. Christian will get a book. What I need is for you guys to just share, on your own networks about the book. So far, it's going really well. I'm incredibly grateful for everybody who supported the launch of the book and bought it and put tweets out or Facebook posts or have reviewed it on Amazon. And part of it, hey guys, this is kind of inside knowledge, but if the launch goes really well, then the publisher in, I think, July is supposed to make a decision about a sequel.
Oh.
So we may end up doing another one or a series of these books, all the same format on different topics. I actually have already pitched what the next one would be. But I'm hoping that happens because I think this is a format, just like you learned with a video, that people will engage it more than listening to an hour-long podcast. I have learned that people will read 2 pages and a doodle much more than a lengthy discourse in a regular book.
It is the doodle. I gotta tell you,
it's the doodles. They love the doodles. And what do you have coming up, Christian?
Well, I just want to say a closing thought. I really want to encourage people to just be really prayerful during this time.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so easy to consume different thoughts and read a bunch of different things and engage in conversations or not engage in them. But ultimately, we want to be the people of Christ. And to do that, we really need time to nurture our spiritual souls, right? To become the people that he's called us to be. And I think, I was talking to a young 20-something today, and he was talking about how overwhelmed he felt with all of the different news he needed to read and all the ways to educate himself. And my encouragement to him was, look, you really do need to make being a thoughtful, conscientious consumer of content, you need to make that a part of your life and a discipline, just like we all need to make a part of our lives reading scripture and integrate that into who we are and not feel like, we have to play catch up all the time. And I just want to call people to be a little bit more thoughtful and prayerful and spend time before the Lord, because as you do that, we'll begin to reflect his character to the culture.
Yeah. I'm kind of amazed in all this interaction over the last 2 weeks, how much time and energy some of my white brothers and sisters will invest in explaining why racism isn't a problem they have to care about. And it just makes me wonder, what if we took that same time and energy to actually try to address racism instead of using the same energy to try to deny that it exists? Good. It's just so oddly counterproductive. Skye, what do you say? Last question for you. Okay, I'm coming to you. Skye, I cannot support Black Lives Matter. It is a Marxist organization that wants to destroy the family and is pro-gay. And have you read their website? What they believe is atrocious. So Skye, how can I support this movement?
I think you have to separate the organization from the words. I understand. I think there are probably some political, cultural, theological, moral positions that the organization Black Lives Matters that may not conform to every Christian's beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But strictly speaking, the words Black Lives Matter, I don't understand why any Christian wouldn't agree with that. Or if you want to just narrow the focus to getting rid of systemic racism, police brutality, and reforming criminal justice in our country, I think those are all issues that not only have Christians historically been in favor for, but should be right now. So I'm
you
not saying
you could just march with a sign that says "Reform criminal justice"
if you really
you're
wanted to.
uncomfortable with the moniker Black Lives Matter.
Right. Just as, no one's asking you to send a check in to the organization, Black Lives Matters, but I think it's beyond that. It'd be, I'm trying to think of the equivalent, but I mean, you got to separate in your mind the politics of this or the institutions from the bigger picture. And
well, I think I think it's similar to people that are critics of Christianity, or painting all of Christians as dominionists or triumphalists, who look, I've read some Christians and here's what they want. They want the Old Testament to be the law of America. They want gay people to be put in prison, and that's what Christians want. And say, no, that's just part. That's just those people over there. That's just this weird little group over here. But you're using the same name, Christian. Okay, maybe that's a bad analogy, but that's one way to look at it.
I'll give you an analogy that really is. I have a bee in my bonnet at the moment.
Oh yeah, go. Anyone who has a bee in their bonnet gets to speak.
I just feel like there are buzzwords that just stop us from investigating or having a deeper conversation. Entitlement is one of them. White and privilege is one of them. If you listen to your video and go a little bit more deeply and understand what we mean when we say white privilege, we might think a little bit more differently about that. Defund the police is another one. When you hear that buzzword, defund the police, you think it means canceling all the police departments and not having law and order, unless you read a little bit more deeply and you look at examples about like what happened in Camden, New Jersey, and then you can realize that it doesn't mean exactly what you thought it means. That's the same thing with racism. When you think about racism, you think it's a name that somebody is calling you, you're a racist, and it has all of these political implications that it doesn't necessarily mean that. So I think we need to not be so offended when we hear a certain word, a buzzword, and look a little bit more deeply into what that word means.
It seems like the Black Lives Matter organization, almost you couldn't have made a better organization to upset people that are concerned about law and order and the status quo. Because if you watch my video, Skye, did you watch my video?
I did.
Okay. In 1968, 81% of Americans said law and order is breaking down in this country. Okay, 81% of Americans. When asked who is responsible for this, the majority blamed two groups. What were those two groups?
Communists?
Communists.
Right? And Negroes who are protesting
Negroes
something.
who start riots.
There you go.
Those were the two groups that the majority of Americans blamed for the breakdown of law and order in 1968. Okay, what is Black Lives Matter? If you look at it from their website, it's communist Negroes who start riots. It is like the perfect storm of what white America thinks is going to destroy us. It's like you couldn't write a better script for people to freak out.
You got to. I'm glad you're bringing up history here, Phil, because in every social reform movement, moderates have usually used the extremist to justify not being on board with the reform. This happened with the abolitionist movement in the 19th century. There were some extreme abolitionists like Garrison, who actually believed that the United States and the Constitution had to be dismantled. That was the only way to solve slavery, was to obliterate the country. And because of those extreme views, there were a lot of moderate whites who would not get on board with abolition, whereas the majority of abolitionists thought, no, we don't have to destroy the country. I mean, even Frederick Douglass believed that the Constitution could be maintained and you could end slavery. But you point out the extremists as a reason to not get involved in something that otherwise your faith and your moral compass would tell you is a right thing to be involved in. It's exactly what's going on now. Yes, of course, there are some leftist extremists involved in Black Lives Matters as a movement. but their presence should not dissuade any Christian from calling for the reforms that would be good for our neighbors who are suffering.
I hear you. Okay.
And that reminds me of your doodle. I loved the House on Fire doodle.
That's up on Twitter.
Popular. Yeah.
Yeah. All houses matter when your house is burning down. Ha, 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 ha. You're a clever doodler. Did anyone take offense to that?
Yes, some people did.
Really?
Oh yeah. That provoked some people. They were upset with me because they didn't feel like it was nuanced enough.
Wow.
Not nuanced enough, Skye. See, because you can't, it's hard to nuance on Twitter. And
or in a doodle.
I'm sure their responses to you on Twitter were also not terribly nuanced. Okay.
Right.
Thanks for listening in. Go to the Holy Post website, holypost.com. You can read Skye's op-ed. You can watch my video. Christian doesn't have her movie posted there in its entirety to watch for free because that might upset her sales agent.
But guess what?
What?
People make a donation for $25.
Yeah.
I will give them a private screening link and they could see my movie. And you do that at thegirlwhoworefreedom.com. Plus we have a whole bunch of deleted scenes and other comments or content at thegirlwhoworefreedom.com. Wow. And follow me on Twitter at Christian's Voice. Because I actually do respond to people. So.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts. See, if I say something snarky and then someone says something back to me, I'm bound to just be even snarkier. It just amplifies. It's just bad. I have to have
a snark snowball.
But I'm not funny either, so.
Yeah,
which is my favorite Ben and Jerry's flavor.
Okay, thanks. Patreon subscribers, thanks for your support. You actually helped produce that video because that's the only source of income we have for doing things like that. So thanks for your support, and we'll try to make more things if you keep supporting us. And have a great week. Try to live out your faith to everyone, regardless of what side of what issue they're on and what your politics might tell you to like or dislike about them. Your religion, your spirituality says to love them. Okay, guys, have a great week, and we will see you next time.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
The Holy Post podcast is a production of Phil Vischer Enterprises, that's Phil's company, and Skye Pilot Media, that's Skye's company. Production assistance by Sean McDuffie, edited by Jason Rugg. Help us create more thoughtful Christian media by supporting us at patreon.com/Holy Post. Also, be sure to leave a review on iTunes so more people can discover thoughtful Christian commentary plus ukulele and occasional butt news.